So for everyone watching, Cathy is going to be coming to Awaken the Goddess Festival this year, and she's going to be giving a really amazing talk. So Cathy, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Okay, I'm Cathy Rowan. The topic that I'm going to be talking on is the feminine as power. And I guess this has become somewhat of a passion of mine, to sort of talk about and work with people who are, I think, sort of stepping into what I call some sort of feminine awakening, some sort of awareness that the world that we live in, with its now quite number of decades long history about equality, often for women that has been about equality within an existing patriarchal system. And as I see it, feminine awakening is about an awareness of a different type of paradigm where masculine and feminine are equal, but it's not a patriarchal paradigm. So I draw my inspirations from some of the ancient pre-patriarchal traditions, and from myth and from story that come from those traditions. In particular, I've been inspired by the tantric traditions of India. And when I use that word tantric, I'm not so much talking of Tantra as it's mainly promoted in the West. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I think, that there are many healing needs that are served by those presentations. But it is actually something different from the actual tantric traditions, because in those traditions, tantra would be like the esoteric aspects of maybe like the Indian Hindu traditions, just as if we were talking about the European traditions, which have mainly been dominated by Christianity over the past couple of thousand years, the Gnostic traditions would be like the tantric equivalent. Or if you're talking about Judaism, it would be the Kabbalah. Or if you're talking about Islam, it would be the Sufi tradition. So that is the esoteric Indian traditions that, if you trace them back, actually have a long feminine history. And I actually started out working in the Taoist traditions, because it was there with the whole philosophy of yin and yang that I started to understand about duality and about masculine and feminine and the different qualities of masculine and feminine. Became fascinated with that. And then I wanted to find a female teacher. I sort of became interested in Tantra after reading a book by a woman called Miranda Shaw. She wrote a book called Passionate Enlightenment, which I think was her PhD thesis from Harvard, no less. But she actually showed that some of the initial research on the Tantric traditions, where there had been an assumption in academia that the gurus were male. She indicated through research that, I think from the endings of the words and stuff, that the names of these teachers, these great teachers, were feminine. They were feminine names, so they were likely to have been women. So I became fascinated by that, and I looked for a female teacher. And obviously my intent was strong through a series of synchronicities. I found what I was looking for, and I've been working with her since 2007. So in answer to your question, I have now quite a long history in working in a feminine tradition. But the way that I actually work with people is through the medium of coaching. And I have taken what I've learned from the traditions and done some additional coaching training so that I can put my work into words that I believe has a wider appeal. So I do teach some of the traditions as workshops, but in my coaching work, I put it in terms that are non-tradition specific. But work with people on either issues of relationship, which of course is a big topic in any of the feminine traditions, and also work with people on topics to do with, sort of with the work, but really about where they want to express themselves in their most authentic way and do the work that they feel that they were meant to do, or find that work. Or quite a lot of times it's with people who are sort of like later on in their careers, who are looking, maybe at the legacy they want to leave. So I call that sort of true significance. But a lot of the work that I do, even when I work with people in that way, a lot of it is about relationship, because you can never really separate those things, I don't feel. And at least for me in my life, that's been the case. And I think, as people move to midlife and beyond, some of these questions of, the importance of getting the relationship piece right and sorting out the relationship patterns, and then expressing themselves more authentically becomes stronger, and that also appears for younger people as well, particularly now. I mean, I know in my generation, things have changed a lot, obviously, since I was in my 20s. So people now, I think, they're coming into a completely different climate than I was in my 20s. So it doesn't just apply to people who are at the later stages of the life. And in fact, I work with anybody really who resonates with my words and my approach.
Yeah.
But, so that's a little bit about me. I think I might have answered your 3 questions.
You have, yeah. I really love the title of your talk, because so often we don't equate femininity and the feminine with power, but we are so powerful as women. I think in lots of ways it's an untapped power, because it has been repressed for so long. And I think it's so amazing that you're talking about it and sort of bringing it to the consciousness of women, that actually our feminine side is our powerful side. We feel like we have to be in the masculine or not, don't we, to just be powerful.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. And I think this whole thing is a game changer for women. I mean, the Dalai Lama is quoted so much, his statement that he made at I think it was a Peace Summit in Vancouver some years ago, this statement about the world will be saved by the Western woman. And of course, that's a very, very inspiring statement. But it also asks the question, how do we put ourselves, what do we need to do to have that power to do that, but what do we actually need to do with ourselves to become the person that can have that sort of influence and that power to make change? Because one of the things that I like to talk to about, well, with both men and women, is sort of like a reframe of the feminine, because of course feminine applies to women and female, and you'd expect women, because they're in female bodies, to have more access to the feminine potentially than do men, which puts women in a stronger position to be the force of change in the world. But we still got to understand what that means for us, and try to understand, what you put in terms of suppression. There's work for us to do to look at those bits that have been suppressed and free ourselves from it. Which actually isn't necessarily about, working on ourselves and adding layers, which is what a lot of us do when we first get into personal development work. But the point suddenly hits, this is me, this is what I am underneath. Actually, I don't have to add layers on and try to be something different.
Yeah.
It's about taking the layers off so I can be myself.
Absolutely.
Maybe my energy itself has power. And certainly in these tantric non-dual traditions, I mean, the masculine is the ground of consciousness. So you could still say, if you wanted to use the word God, as the Western religions have done, you can still say, yes, they still see God in a sense as masculine, because they're saying it all comes from this field of consciousness, but they don't see it, this oneness. They see the power of that field of consciousness they see as being feminine, which makes perfect sense, because when you look, you go to the other end of the spectrum and you come down to us and all life forms. Well, it's the feminine that gives birth. So of course, from that point of view, the feminine in myth is what births all form. Yeah. So if that's the force that births everything, why would you not honor that?
So true. That's the only
Quite
question
simple, really.
yeah.
Why would you not honor the power, the creative power of the universe?
Absolutely.
Which
Absolutely.
is in both men and women. But
Yeah.
women, of course, are just that little bit closer to it because they have the power through their own bodies
Mm.
to birth. So we, you know, yeah.
Yeah. I got a little sort of all up my spine when you said that.
Yeah. So I think, if women can sort of, I mean, it's an easy thing, I think, for women to understand when you explain it in those terms. But then there's the next thing. Okay, there's that power. Yes, I can see that I have that power. But how do I really embody that
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a way that feels true to me? Because of course we're all different as women, and none of us, we don't want to be the same. We're not the same. It's about knowing that we're all here with some different little aspect of that power, this unlimited vast power. It's a universal power, and we all, if you want to look at it this way, in Tantra we say that everything in this world, so-called real world, is a reflection of consciousness and its power. So, and therefore, we all hold a little bit. I see it as we're all facets of this huge jewel. We all hold a little bit of this power. So, therefore, what's the gift that each one of us is here to give with this power of creation, which may be about birthing children, but there's many other ways, aspects of creativity and power. And I actually also believe, Samina, on that question that. It's the feminine that's the power of transformation itself. So it's like men and women somehow or other have to be initiated to this power, and it's like a gateway to step through. And that idea is really supported by some of the work, like people like Joseph Campbell, who wrote Hero of a Thousand Faces. He had the hero's journey model.
Oh.
Which a lot of people think of it as a masculine thing, but I think he used the term hero quite a bit. You can use the term hero as meaning the ego.
Mm.
So it's the bit of the feminine. We really sort of come into our feminine power at the point where the point where we're not so controlled by our ego, where we can see that what the ego is really is all the defenses and we've put around ourselves.
Mm.
And once we can start to, it's the ego that protects our wounding. So once we start to loosen that a little bit, understand that, the power that's actually inherent in the wounds, because our gifts lie there too. Again, that's in many of the traditions, and it's something we can. It's too big a topic for right now, but it's something that is it's a really interesting place to work, and that's what I believe that the feminine does. I believe the feminine is a healing and transformational force, and that's the power. That I believe is inherent in all women. And actually I saw a quote the other day, because I think it's, there's the anniversary coming up of women getting the vote, 80 years, I think, yeah. Apparently Emmeline Pankhurst said something like, half of the population will need to awaken so that they can awaken the other half. Quote, so I can't remember the quote. I'm going to have to find it so I can quote it when I give my talk. But I thought, oh my goodness, she said that, 100 years ago or whatever.
How amazing is that? Oh, Cathy, it's been so beautiful talking to you. Honestly, I wish we could do this for another hour, because you're coming up with all these amazing jewels.
There's so much scope on this topic. I mean, it's deep and it's vast, and it just makes sense. It just makes sense to me. It's sort of like the only topic that I really want to talk on and work in anymore.
Well, it's good that you are passionate about it, because you know we need people to be having these conversations and to be saying these things and to be so knowledgeable in it. You know, I know everything sort of on a feeling level, but I can't necessarily articulate that. I don't have the words, or I don't have the composure to sit there and have a debate, or sit there and sort of express it in a way that will convince people that, oh, you know, what she's saying is absolutely right. So it's so important that people like you are doing this kind of work.
And the knowing comes first, Samina. So that's an important point, because as soon as you have that knowing, you know when you're listening to people whether that's ringing true with you or not. So that's so important to have that knowing there, so you can sort through and dispense with the people who you don't think are it doesn't ring true to you, basically. So that's important first, and the power to speak it comes with the training and the experience, because the knowing is then deeper in actually in the body.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I look forward to coming in July.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.